Hi guys, I'm Giselian. I can't sleep, having just been evacuated. Lots of high stress, but the easiest way to relieve stress is to let it all out. So I'm a storyteller, and I'm going to tell you a story. It's going to be a story in a number of parts, and it's going to be a story that feels very familiar. But I have to say that this is for entertainment purposes only, and it is just a story. So once upon a time in this country, there was a plan, and this plan involved moving property and securing the land for a train track. Unfortunately, where the train track needed to go, there were people in the way. And there was this little place which was like a paradise. And in this place, there were lots of people, and they didn't want to move. So even though the people in power wanted them to move and actually needed them to move, they thought, how could we get these people to move? Because we can't just buy them out, because that will cost too much money. It would be a shame if a major calamity happened. Now, it just so happened that major calamity happened in the form of a fire in this place which was like a paradise, right along the route where the high-speed rail train was going to go in this story. And all of a sudden, fire started coming. And it seemed to be almost like fire from the sky. And even though they tried to blame it on other people setting arsonist fires, which was interesting, but all of the buildings just burnt in such a manner that they just turned to white ash. Even forest fires couldn't do that in this story. But sure enough, all of those houses just burnt down to the ground. So there was nothing left. Now, one would assume in this story that people, you'd use insurance, and the insurance company would help them to rebuild their lives after such a tragedy. But the powers that be in this story, which is of course fiction, decided that it would be in the best interest not to rebuild, because they could actually say, hand on heart, that because of the fire, the earth became toxic, and therefore it was a health problem to rebuild residential properties where they once stood. But it would be okay if they would sell the land to developers so that they could create a commercial corridor and just build train tracks, because that wouldn't be a problem, because train tracks don't need to have non-toxic places to be. So that was the beginning in this story of a number of strategies in order to be able to create a pathway. And that pathway went from this place, which was just like a paradise, to a place on the sea. Now, there were lots of really, really good real estate in this story, in this place on the sea. And in this story, the power companies were used in some ways as an excuse. But all of a sudden, the fire started raging, and it got more powerful and more powerful, just as the winds were created as well. It was almost like a coincidence that all of a sudden the winds came along at exactly the same time as the fire started, which created like a blast furnace. and it went all the way down. Sometimes it was actually traveling faster than anyone could run. And this fire traveled down to the sea and took over 1,800 homes in this story. And guess how many were rebuilt? Not many. Because they used the same playbook in this story. And they said, this land is far too toxic, and we can't give permits to rebuild on toxic land, can we? Because we need to secure our people. And so a lot of the homes never got rebuilt. People had to move out to different places, which left the land then open to be sold at much, much cheaper cost. And that's how the first part of the story was. Now, where did this fire come from? Well, it just so happened that the army, in this story, which is in course totally fictional, developed a way of creating like laser beams. And it was a weapon which used energy that was very direct. So much so that it could actually pinpoint where it needed to be, and was at such a high temperature that even metal would melt. Yeah. So they utilized all of these, but they didn't realize that some people didn't want to do this, and that some people had a conscience, and that some people were told about this. But they still decided that they needed to keep moving property and moving people for another strategy. And it's that other strategy that I will tell you in the next part of the story, because the story gets more interesting as we go along. Because the story morphs, and all of a sudden, people very high up in this world, in this story, had a lot to lose and a lot to hide. And there were places where these people would live, these high people, and they were doing bad things, and they got caught. And all of a sudden, they decided that they were going to use this strategy of burn to not only clear the ground for what they wanted, but also to eradicate the evidence of what they'd done. This is Simon Trezelyan. This is just a story. Speak to you soon.